Good morning. Welcome. Please be seated. I confess that even before the shocking assault on Israel by Hamas, I was having a lot of difficulty with today's readings. Perhaps you've had that funny feeling yourself, what to make of them. I was struggling with the reading from Exodus that describes a very angry and wrathful God, a God so disappointed with the chosen people that Moses has to intervene. It is Moses who mollifies God by promising that he will redirect these fallen people to righteousness and again into obedience. Somehow Moses manages to bring some kind of order out of this disorder. In the reading from Paul's epistle to Ephesians, we learn of two women, Euodia and Syntyche. These women have been instrumental in spreading the gospel in Philippi, and they are disagreeing with each other. Paul pleads with the people of Philippi to help these women settle their differences so that they continue their important work. In this case, it's the people who are the peacemakers. They are the ones to bring order out of disorder. And then in the gospel reading for today, we learn of a king whose invitation to a wedding banquet for his son turns into murderous mayhem. Instead of a joyous banquet, his neighbors kill his slaves who are delivering the invitation to the banquet. The king responds by sending out his troops to kill the killers. The king, in a final act of anger and retribution, throws a man out of the wedding banquet for not being dressed properly. The king's wrath sends the man into the outer darkness where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. No signs of peace in this situation. Darkness and misery everywhere. As allegory, we might come to understand that these lessons are about the contradictory conditions of God's kingdom. From Moses, from the people of Philippi, from the king, we might conclude that when God sees a breach of faith, or a breakdown of good order and discipline, or threats to work of the gospel, he may become seriously angry and may, as a result, demand an accounting and a repairing of the breach. Through Moses, through the people of Philippi, through the king, an accounting must be made, and it is going to be hard, painful, and chaotic. What is this loving, forgiving, peaceable God up to in these stories? As I wrestled with today's readings, war suddenly broke out in the Middle East. And right now, in real time, in our immediate consciousness, we are witnessing truly apocalyptic events. We are witnessing an unimaginable, but perhaps inevitable assault on Israel and Gaza. We have seen these kind of dreadful events before in Israel, in Ukraine, Nigeria, Haiti, and so many other places. There is always a horrendous loss of life, starvation, displacement, and moral injury. This is one of these times we'd like to prostrate ourselves and plead with God to end the insanity. What are these lessons telling us about how to face human-made mayhem that we see around the globe and maybe see in our very own city? There is plenty to lament right here in our country and communities. There's chaos in Congress, there are daily murders and assaults, as well as deaths from suicide and drug overdoses. We worry about the safety in our schools, and we may even worry about the behavior of our neighbors. When my brother and I were young and would fight with each other, usually over washing the dishes, does that sound familiar? Our dad would say to us, "Fight, you rascals, I hate peace." He actually used a much harsher word than rascals, but I can't use that here at this time. But you get the idea. For us, our dad was the God of our lives. We were accountable to him. When he said this to us, we did not think he was so much angry anymore, but rather sarcastic, pointing out, not so subtly, the error of our ways. Our great good fortune is that despite, or maybe because, of these childhood times of being thrown into darkness, we created a bond that has carried us through so many years since. We are close today. We are each other's best friends. And when we recall being thrown into outer darkness, we can see how those events ultimately bound us together. When either of us is in utter darkness, we help each other out. We reach in. We ask important questions. We listen lovingly to each other. We are able to dig deep into personal dilemmas and come to new understandings of the pain we're experiencing right now. I believe that as we review our common experiences and realities as siblings, we have moved toward not only mutual peace, but greater love. Our Father had an intense approach to reconciliation, not unlike God's burning hot against the people of Israel, where Moses intervened, and God backed off. Moses promised God that his chosen people would become obedient and worthy once again. Moses could take the responsibility for healing the breach between the people and God because he knew them so well. Moses knew their backstories. Where's the hope in these lessons for today? Where is the hope in our personal, community, and political lives? What are we supposed to be learning about alienation, retaliation, and estrangement? Mayhem prohibits the ability to get the backstory. In the current situation in the Middle East, there's a long and torturous backstory, which we need to remember and understand. My brother and I know each other's backstories, and as a result, we can be gentle and caring and non-judgmental. We have our moments, but we work through the times when we have misunderstood or hurt one another. Living as Christians in a broken world requires that before we can intervene, we must know God, ourselves, and each other. We must listen to God, ourselves, and each other. We must listen to each other's backstories. Living in a broken world means living with differences and contradictions, just as there are terrible contradictions in the lessons today. The world we live in is often noisy, exploitative, unjust, complex, and angry. It is only when we're firmly rooted in our faith that we can hope to be healers in this broken world. Yes, we lament the wars in the Middle East, in Ukraine, and in Africa. We are horrified and wonder how a loving God can permit such horrific events to occur. The golden calf, the disagreeing women, and the messed up wedding banquet are examples of human brokenness. We get distracted from the real banquet that God invites us to, and where we can get a glimpse of joy and hope. Brother David Vryhoff of the Society of St. John the Evangelist delivered a sermon on December 2nd of 2018. I'm not going to read the sermon, but I would like you to listen to these things he said about keeping in mind when standing and raising our heads in perilous times. First, people of faith are not exempt from the world's suffering. Jesus, throughout the gospel, called for faithfulness and endurance in apocalyptic times. It is only with humility that we can confront the brokenness of the world. We can learn, secondly, that God does not forsake us in these times, but is always with us, and that the purposes of God cannot be thwarted. In the end, darkness cannot extinguish the light of God. We are to stand up and raise our heads. Thirdly, we can learn the importance of keeping before us a vision of what can be, what will be in the day of God's coming. God has given us a vision of the future where peace reigns and a vision of the ultimate banquet. We must lament and pray, most humbly for God's grace to break into the chaos. We must also be conscious of the glimmers of hope that God creates in us, in our communities, and this community. Think of the glimmers of hope at St. Mark's, our racial equity and justice initiative, community of hope, the reverence for the Dakota land beneath us, our newly baptized, the Groveland Food Shelf, Minneapolis College, Minnesota Council of Churches Refugee Resettlement, the Climate Justice Task Force, Way of Love, and the Round Tables. We are not abandoned, nor are any of God's children abandoned. While lives are being lost and war portends a humanitarian crisis, we must cling to the hope that God offers to all of us, those of us who are safe and those of us who are not safe. There are people of faith right now who are intervening to save and protect lives. They are people of faith, be they Christian, Jewish, or Muslim. They are actively involved in saving lives and tending to the injured and the dispossessed. Let us recognize humbly and with prayer the way in which God is inspiring those who are close to the chaos and striving to make peace. Let us humbly acknowledge that we are broken people who are also forgiven and held in love by a gracious God. Let us face all that is broken around us and humbly offer our gifts of service, whatever they are and however they may be deployed. And let us hold before us the vision of what God hopes for us and where peace remains. As Brother David has said, stand up and look despair in the face and say, I will not be afraid. Strengthen your resolve to oppose violence in all its forms, to conserve and protect the earth, to toil and sweat for justice, to pray and work for peace. Do not fear, only believe. Amen.